Hi everyone, thank you for attending our session, The Holy Grail of Learning, a guide for promoting student engagement. We wish we could be seeing you all in person right now, but understandably that is not possible. So instead, we have created a few collaborative spaces using Padlet where we can connect asynchronously and hopefully share some ideas about student engagement with each other. More details will be provided later in this session, but the links to these collaborative spaces can be found in the comment section below. And then in addition, there's also a link to a handout that accompanies this presentation. So if you wish, you can access that now to take notes and jot down any engagement ideas for your own class. All right, so let's get started. To begin, student engagement has been heralded as the holy grail of learning, this sort of key to classroom success. And rightly so, as engagement is linked to a host of important academic outcomes. Yet engagement often remains elusive to many instructors, so it's one of those things where we know when we have it, we know when students are engaged, but when we don't have it, we don't always know how to get students engaged. And so it follows that the goals of this session are to first introduce engagement as a multidimensional construct, to next reflect on different engagement profiles that can occur in our classrooms, and third, to brainstorm and share some strategies to support student engagement. So first, let's talk about engagement as a multidimensional construct. Academics who study engagement often think about engagement as having different types or dimensions. So for example, effective engagement refers to the feelings one might have, like enjoyment and interest, when they are doing a particular activity. Behavioral engagement refers to a person's hard work and concentrated effort, and cognitive engagement refers to the degree to which a person perceives the activities they are doing as valuable and important. And so what are some cues for these different dimensions of engagement? How do you tell if a student is effectively behaviorally or cognitively engaged? There are many and varied cues for each dimension, but we selected a few common ones here based on teacher reports. So some signs of effective engagement that students are interested and enjoying what they are doing can include facial expressions like smiling and laughing, or any signs of apparent excitement. Behavioral engagement tends to be a bit easier to gauge, as you can usually tell when students are on task, when they're not being easily distracted, especially by technology, and when they're really working hard. Cognitive engagement tends to be a little trickier, but some cues that students find the work valuable and important may include asking questions or sharing examples that connect content to their own lives. And so students may show one, two, or all three types of engagement, as well as varied combinations of the three dimensions. And in an effort to better understand student engagement and how to promote it, our research team developed what we call profiles of engagement to capture these different combinations of engagement that students reported. And so our research team spent hundreds of hours observing in classrooms, collecting real-time reports of students' engagement, and in total, we analyzed more than 12,000 student reports from over 1,100 youth to construct these 7 different configurations of the 3 engagement dimensions. And it's important to know here that our participants were middle and high school students in science classrooms, but we think that our findings can still be helpful to us as instructors of psychology. And so before I get started explaining some of these profiles, I just want to say a few quick words about the graphs. They're meant to be visual representations of these profiles, and you can interpret them as 3 representing maximum engagement, 0 as representing average engagement, and -3 as representing lowest engagement. And so we're going to begin with the full engagement profile. The first 3 profiles, all of the dimensions are hanging together, so we call them concordant dimensions. And then the full engagement profile, you can see that all of the dimensions are hanging together higher. So this would be, full engagement would be when students are enjoying what they're doing, they're putting in effort, and they think the work is valuable and important. So we're high in all 3 there. The next profile, the dimensions are still hanging together, but they're hanging around that average mark now. So we call this moderate engagement. and it's where students are somewhat enjoying what they're doing, they're somewhat putting in effort, and they somewhat think the work is valuable and important. And then the last of the profiles where these dimensions are hanging together, we call low engagement. And so you can see all the dimensions are lower here. And so this would look like students not enjoying what they're doing, not putting in effort, and not really thinking that the work is valuable and important. And then we get into these varied combinations of profiles. So here, busy engagement, you can see the affective dimension is a bit lower, behavioral is a bit higher, and cognitive is lower again. So busy engagement would look like students not enjoying what they're doing, putting in some effort, but not thinking that the work is valuable and important. And so we call this busy because students are working, but they don't like it and they don't find it important. Then we have rational engagement, where the affective and behavioral dimensions are lower and the cognitive dimension is higher. And so here, this would look like students not enjoying what they're doing, not putting in effort, but finding the work valuable and important. And so we call this rational because students do see the importance of the work, but they're not enjoying it and they're not working at it. Then we have recreational engagement, where the affective and behavioral dimensions are higher and the cognitive dimension is lower. And so students are enjoying what they're doing, they're putting in effort, but they don't find the work valuable. And so we call this recreational because it seems like students are working and having fun, but they're missing that value piece. And then lastly, we have purposeful engagement, where the affective dimension is low, and then the behavioral and cognitive dimensions are a bit higher. And so this would look like students not enjoying what they're doing, but they're putting in effort and they think it's valuable and important. And so we call this purposeful because they do see the importance and they are working at it, but they do not like it. And so I know I just threw a lot of information at you and you deserve a little break to digest it all. So if you haven't already, I invite you to access the engagement guide handout. The link is in the comments again, and reflect on these profiles and dimensions in the context of your own class. So first, which of these 7 profiles do you think you see most often in your class? And then from there, which profile would you like to see more of? And of course, the answer to this is always full engagement, which is definitely something to aim for, but also it is unrealistic and unlikely that you will have full engagement for all students all of the time. And so it's definitely something we want to shoot for, but some of the other profiles can be optimal depending on the situation as well. And so think about which profiles you would like to see more of, including the full and others. And then compare the profiles that you think you see most often and the ones that you would like to see. Are there any dimensions that are jumping out to you as low or missing? That might give you some clues as to which dimensions you might want to support in your own classroom. And so you can jot that down on your handout so you can reference it later. And so now that you've reflected a bit on the engagement dimensions and profiles, we're going to talk about what we can actually do to promote engagement in our classes. And so in the second half of this session, we're going to share some ideas, and we're hoping that you all will connect on Padlet to share some of your own ideas with each other. And so to do this, in the next few slides, I'm going to present 3 vignettes to help us think about how we might support engagement. And so the first, Tommy has to take a psychology class as one of his major requirements. He tells the instructor on the first day of class how he hates psychology and he will never be interested in it. He thinks the discussion topics are boring. Instead, he sees himself as more of an artistic person. And so you can think about this and see what jumps out to you. What jumped out to me was effective engagement. This seems like a lack of interest and enjoyment. So what are some strategies we can use to promote enjoyment and interest? Go ahead and go to that effective engagement Padlet link and add your own ideas. And so now that you've had a chance to share on Padlet, we will offer some of our own strategies from our research. All of these strategies that we mention will help to promote engagement broadly, but we did try to group strategies by which dimension they most strongly relate to in order to help you choose which strategies might be most beneficial to implement in your own classroom. But before we even get started talking about individual dimensions, there's one strategy that we consider to be foundational, and that is creating a supportive environment that promotes belongingness. And so related to this, you can ask yourself, can students openly express their identity and individuality in your class? Even if you think the answer is yes, are you explicitly communicating this to students? If not, you may want to consider how you can explicitly say this to students so you're communicating that message very clearly to them. And then also, are your course materials inclusive of multiple perspectives? So will all students in your classroom relate to the materials of your course? And so these are some questions that we should ask ourselves when thinking about how we can create a supportive environment and promoting belongingness. And we need to do this really before we can even move forward with supporting any of the other dimensions. This is really the foundational piece for everything else. But talking about effective engagement specifically now, what strategies can we use to promote enjoyment and interest? Here are some ideas from our own research. The first broad theme is to incorporate student interests. And here you might be thinking, well, duh, if I want to promote interest, of course I would incorporate student interest. That doesn't seem like, big news. And yes, you would be right. But the thing is that it's not always easy to do. So we always want to do this, but it's sometimes easier said than done. And so the first step in incorporating student interests is you have to get to know your students, right? And their individual interests. So we don't want to assume that, kids these days like memes, so we should incorporate memes and therefore they will be interested. We want to ask students what their actual interests are. And we also want to provide opportunities for students to share their interests during class. And it kind of communicates that we care about their interests when we provide time for them to talk about them, and it helps build community when classmates can see who else in the class shares interests. And then the other broad strategy is to not be afraid to showcase your enthusiasm. We've all been in classes or meetings where it feels like the instructor or the leader is not interested in being there whatsoever, right? And then it makes us not want to be there. And so enthusiasm is contagious. Students won't be excited if you aren't excited. And so you can do this by generally being excited about the topics that you're teaching, but also you could use hooks at the beginning of lessons or units to spend some time just getting students interested in what is about to come. And then you'll often get more buy-in anyway when you get to heavier content. And so moving on to this next scenario, June enjoys learning about the different topics in her psychology class. She sometimes understands the concepts, but she lacks the confidence to answer all questions thoroughly. She tends to play on the safe side by just answering the questions she knows, and is even hesitant to participate in small or large group activities. And so you can reflect on this and think what jumps out to you. What jumped out to us is a lack of behavioral engagement in this case. And so the question then becomes, what strategies can we use to promote hard work and effort? And so if you want to follow the link to the behavioral engagement Padlet page, you can go ahead and add your own ideas there. And then here are some ideas again from our research. So one broad theme for promoting behavioral engagement would be to help students set goals. And we again want to explicitly communicate these objectives and goals to students. So often we have objectives and goals for students, either in our head or on our lesson plans, but sometimes we forget to actually tell students what our goals for them are, and so they have no idea what they're working towards. And then also we want students to set their own personal goals, which may be tied to their own personal interests or their major. So not just our goals for the lesson, or for their learning, but they can set their own goals as well. And then if it fits for the context of your class, you might even consider implementing a progress tracker, which will help students keep track of their growth and towards their goals. And then the second broad theme here is to emphasize the importance of effort. So, to promote effort, we want to emphasize that effort is important in our class, right? And part of this is normalizing failure as part of the learning process. So it's not failure so much as a challenge. And we want to praise persistence when students encounter challenges. So we want to de-emphasize getting things right and emphasize growth and sticking with it. And something you might consider doing in your class is allowing revisions. Revision policies often inherently promote effort because it suggests that you will try, and then you'll get feedback and you'll have a chance to improve again, rather than emphasizing just getting it right on the first round. And so if that works for your class, you might consider doing that. And then regardless of if you can implement revisions or not, you really want to aim to give specific feedback so students know exactly what to improve upon. Otherwise, they won't know what to put effort into. And so, the comment, nice work, never helped anyone. What was nice about the work? All of it? If so, what do they put effort into the next time? Or, on the other hand, needs work on something is also not helpful. What needs work? That doesn't give students any information about what they should improve on or work on. And so without specific feedback, we might fall into the trap of creating an environment for learned helplessness where students feel like they don't know what to do or what to improve on, and so they feel like everything they do to try fails, and so they might as well not try, right? They just give up. And we don't want that to happen. So we really want to emphasize growth and give specific feedback so students know what they can focus on growing in. And so our third scenario here, Chase is learning about research methods in psychology class. However, he does not see this topic as useful as he hopes to become a veterinarian. He sees no connection between research methods and his future career. And so again, you can see what jumps out to you here. We identified this as a lack of cognitive engagement. Chase isn't seeing the topic as valuable. And so then the question becomes, what strategies can we use to promote value and importance? And you can go ahead and click on that cognitive engagement Padlet link and share your own ideas. And then here we have some from our research. And so you might see that our two ideas look really similar here. They look like they're one idea, but I'll explain the difference between them. So the main theme for promoting value and importance is making connections to real life. And it's important that we do this to real life now and real life later for students. So the real life now part is explaining how the content and the topics that they're learning are relevant to their experiences now at this point in their lives. And we want to go beyond metaphors here. So sometimes we find instructors think that they're making connections to real life when they're just really making metaphors. So we want to give clear examples of how the content we're teaching can be useful in students' everyday life. What can they use it for? And then we want to provide opportunities for students to make their own connections. So if students, think of how the topics connect to their own life, have them share that out and value that. And then the later part is we also want to allow students to make connections to their future goals. So this could be career aspirations. And so to incorporate those connections, you have to know what students' future goals are. And so again, you have to ask them. And then you want to explain how what they're learning now can be useful in these different career goals later on. So we want to make connections to their life now and their life later. And then here we provided sort of a summary chart of these engagement strategies. You can see the broad strategies on the left, with creating a supportive environment being foundational to all. And then we have the strategies with which dimension they relate most strongly to. And so again, all of these strategies will help support engagement broadly, not just the one dimension listed, but because it's usually helpful to start with one strategy rather than try to implement a bunch of new things in the middle of a semester, this table is meant to be a guide to help you select which strategy you might want to start with in order to support the dimension you wish to target. And so here, just some important takeaways before I let you go. So engagement is a multidimensional construct, and we want to look for signs of all three dimensions. We want to support all of the dimensions. We want to make sure we're not just getting behavioral engagement or just getting effective engagement, but ideally we want to incorporate ways to support all three in our class. And then using engagement profiles can provide a richer description of student engagement. So we see them as a tool that can help you think about these dimensions in your own classroom. But we want to say that it is important to remember that these profiles are momentary. Any student may engage in one way during one activity or one class, and then in another way in the next activity or the next class. And so we should never use profiles to label students as like low engagement. That is not what we want to do. Instead, they're just descriptive tools to help us think about engagement in order to figure out which dimension we might be able to target in order to help students be more engaged. So we're not using these profiles to label students. Instead, they're just a tool. And lastly, before I let you go, I just want to say that if you are interested in more information about this work, you can visit our site, www.engagestudents.com. And the link to our site will also be in the comments and is also on the handout. So please go there if you would like to learn more about our work. And then I want to say thank you to our team who have all been involved in this research that we were able to share it with you today. And thank you for listening. Even I know there's a lot going on right now, so we appreciate you taking the time to learn about our research and think about student engagement in your class.